So I'm joined today with Niamh, and we're going to go through a series of topics and questions. Now, we've kind of role reversal here today. I'm usually the one asking all the questions. So Niamh today is going to ask me some questions, a bit about my personal background and a bit about, I suppose, my educational path and my life path to date, hopefully having some correlation with the business Boston for Life. So Niamh, take it away. Don't ask any too intruding questions, but okay, work away.
Okay, I guess you know what? I'm going to throw you kind of a curveball to start off with.
Okay.
And then I'll go with the gentle questions after that. So, courage, fearless, and illuminate. These are 3 words that I've seen on your website. So I was wondering if you could just talk me through those words.
Yeah, so courage, fearless, and illuminate are the essence really of the business. They're the brand values that I came across and came upon as I came up with the name. So the courage, all 3 of them really are kind of core attributes and core strengths that I feel not only I have, but my students currently have that I teach with learning difficulties. Courage, I think, is a really strong and powerful word. It has a really strong backbone for me, and it generally is like day to day, in and out of school or in and out of college. It takes endless amount of courage really to go in and sit an exam and do spelling tests and do all those things. You consistently seem to have a bottomless pit of courage. Hand in hand with that really is the fearless element, that it's very easy to be consumed and caught up in fear. So it's, and for all of us really, not people with learning difficulties, for everybody, it's very consumed, and especially during challenging times, both economically and internationally, it's very easy for us as human beings to be caught in a trap of a fear cycle. So to element and embody that element of fearlessness helps grow and thrive as a person. Now, I'm not saying I'm perfect. Plenty of fears and plenty of things that I'm still currently afraid of that I'm working on. But that embodiment of trying to do that consistently is really the core essence of what the business is. And illuminate very much links in obviously to a shining characteristic that maybe not in a traditional sense. Maybe it's not getting all A's or getting, all the different pieces of paper or all the different qualifications. You can shine in lots of different aspects and lots of different ways of life, be both academically or outside of school, or by doing charity work, or by being a good role model for other people. So the illuminate really helps articulate and helps present an image of a person that's just able to shine, and that doesn't have to be when they walk into a room. That just is, they have that within them. And I feel like we all, no matter whether people have learning difficulties or not, we all have those attributes and so many more fabulous attributes that if we could just tap into, we'd all grow and develop an awful lot better. Does that answer your question?
It does, absolutely. That's fantastic. Yeah. Just coming from that, you said that these are attributes that a lot of your current students have. Are these attributes that your students would have coming? Like, do you find that students come to you feeling like they don't have any courage and feeling that they do feel fear, and that then changes for them, or?
Yeah, so I think it's a wide range of skills, I suppose, and traits that I look at with them and that people come to me with. So it goes obviously the whole spectrum between primary, secondary, college, and adults. So again, as we merge through different walks of life and through different paths, we kind of need different tools and different skill sets to take on. But I suppose the main things really that are seen quite clearly is from a confidence perspective. So that self-worth, that confidence element really gets eroded away consistently in a system that doesn't suit people with learning differences. So that over time gradually eradicates then that shining and that illuminating element. And then you kick in with bits of fear because you're just getting sick of a system And then that's when your courage then needs to go into overdrive, and you go in this cycle of complete and utter chaos and just on the hamster wheel of burning yourself out, trying to fight and beat a system that kind of isn't changing or drastically changing anytime soon. So it's an awful lot of different skill sets, an awful lot of different areas that people will come for, not only generally from an educational standpoint of just having to work on reading or having to work on exams or, study skills. It's a core underlying help to, I suppose, bring the best foot forward and bring the best version of themselves forward into the next school year or into the next path that they're on and they want to learn through.
Okay, so basically it's the system can be a bit of an issue then, obviously, for people.
Yeah, the system is still a bit of an issue. Now they're doing work on it, and it has changed and it's evolving, and I think there's more definitely diversity and inclusion elements being brought in, both with continuous based assessments for junior and bits of leaving and more practical. So it has changed an awful lot since I did my leaving cert, which isn't that vast amount of years ago. So it is moving in the right direction. However, that ongoing help and support day to day really is very, very much lacking. If a person sits in and does their maths in both either primary or secondary school for their 40 minutes or an hour, and they go home and they have to do bits of their homework and learning concepts and understanding that ongoing assistance to help with that understanding and help with that learning isn't there, and that short time frame, again, of 40 minutes or an hour, that might suit loads of kids and might suit loads of people to absorb the information, generally isn't enough time for people with learning difficulties. You kind of need to learn it and then take on another bit and then have a bit of a break and go again. Now, this is very generalized, that isn't always the way, but it's just a different way of learning, and it's a different way of seeing things, and the system, although changing, still doesn't cater for that.
Okay. I'd love to know a bit about your experience of the system. So at what point in your education did you feel like I'm a bit different, or did you feel that sort of conflict between the system and you maybe not fitting into it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I suppose that would have taken a long time for me to gain any major understanding as to how I didn't fit into that system. So I would have worked endlessly. I had no other choice really but to work endlessly, both in primary and secondary, and then obviously in college, because everything took so much longer, really. So it was a constant work element to get good enough grades, but grades that I always was slightly underwhelmed with, or grades that I always thought I felt I deserved better in. It wasn't really until later in the Leaving Cert cycle, I actually moved school, and then I was assessed then to be dyslexic, because it was only highlighted, well, it was only followed up on at that stage. It was highlighted earlier, but acted upon at a later stage in school. So it took many, many years of me being in an education system, probably about 12, maybe 11 years in a system that was very rigid and very confined, as it was back then. Again, not that long ago, but it's still very different to how it is now, where I had constant tests and constant exams and parent-teacher meetings where they just were saying how great and how bright I was, but just that it wasn't translated into on-the-day tests and on-the-day marks, and endless times at home with trying to learn off bits of information and trying to understand like the alphabet and telling the time and times tables, all of those things. Some of them still a bit of a wash today. Totally don't say that it isn't. Some of them are still unknown concepts.
Sure, they are for
Um,
everybody.
well,
Even
that's good.
times tables, I don't think I ever got past 7.
Great, fabulous. So there's, yeah, it's a challenge, really. It is very much a challenge, and those years of you growing and developing both as a child and into a teenager and then gradually into an adult are so fundamental to your overall development for the rest of your life, that in a system that doesn't suit you for so long as well, when you're in it for so long, really has so many detrimental effects on all aspects.
Yeah, it seems like it must take up an awful lot of your time.
Mm.
An awful lot of your childhood must be spent just trying to get your homework done.
Well, yeah, and some kids that I see now, and they like to put in so much effort and so much work, and an awful lot of their childhood is taken by this, and then it's a choice though as well. There's not a lot of children that, there is elements of obviously sport and all of those outside extracurricular activities that are really, really vital, but there is that bit extra time that just has to be put in to some level in order to grasp a concept, in order to wanting to achieve and understand and get through a system, and there's plenty of people that pull back from that and that doesn't suit them at the time, and that's totally fine. But there's plenty of people and plenty of kids really just have that drive, and they really want to get it, and they really want to understand and be up to date with everything. But with that drive and determination comes pressure, really, and comes a constant battle, really, with the clock, which I still face today, that there just is a time battle for a realistic perspective as to, right, if I have an hour, can I do my maths homework in an hour? And I would think, yeah, of course, no bother, like, and it could be pages, and 4 hours later I could be still there and might not even be finished.
Yeah. You mentioned extracurricular activities there. For you personally, was there anything outside of school that that you got comfort or escape from?
Yeah, so as a child, I loved basketball. I did loads of sports, really. Did football, did Irish dancing, loved swimming. It's very active, really loved art. So I was 8, and I was fortunate enough to partake in lots of those, which was great because it was a really good let out. And it's really, really important for some elements of that to be balanced, because all of us have interests and have, stuff that we'd like to learn more of, especially as children, but also as we get older, that we might not take on then as much as we get older. Be like, oh, I like doing that, but there isn't enough time. All of those things are really vital for us to still keep on. So I still do an awful lot of those things, but just different levels of sport and different interests as I've gotten older. But that let out is vitally important, but then it comes with a trade-off. So particularly as I got to kind of more the leaving cert cycle, there was less time definitely for those type of things. The time had to be balanced differently. I'll always remember I joined a running club, and I'm still joining a running club, and we used to train a few evenings during the week, and I did after school study some days, so I was able to make one of those training sessions every week, and it'd be towards the end of the week and I'd be exhausted, both in 5th but mainly in 6th year. I'd be so shattered. So I'd come home from being at school for the whole day. I'd literally go to sleep, hopefully for like a half an hour or an hour, and then I'd get up and go training. And it had to be such a rigid timetable, like if I didn't get in all those things, or if I didn't do that, then nothing would really get done, because school takes up so much time, and then homework and studying, because that's just endless. There's always something else to go over or to learn. So it is very important to keep those on, but it is very important that that is then somewhat planned, particularly for people with learning difficulties, because it's so easy to get caught up in, oh, I've loads of stuff to do there tonight, sure, I just won't go to that. And then that becomes a pattern, and that's not a healthy pattern. There always has to be bits of that let out, bits of socializing, and bits of balance.
Mm.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that it was in fifth year that you got an assessment and were diagnosed with dyslexia. So was that a relief for you? Did you exhale and think, oh, finally, or?
It's such an interesting concept. So many people say that to me, especially as well recently. They're like, oh, because it was so long and I was in a system for so long, was it then such like a cloud moment, of the clouds or the sea parts and like everything becomes, fairy tales. Unfortunately, I could say yeah, but I'd be lying. Unfortunately, not really. Again, this is still a good few years back where dyslexia and lots of learning difficulties isn't as accepted as they are today. And that still is, there's a considerable amount of work to do on that. By no means, both in schools or in corporates or any way, that it is still widely accepted. However, it has shifted and moved some way in the right direction. But when I was doing it, and when I was detected at the time, it still wasn't something, to be shouting from the rooftops. It's generally only till, and since really the last few years, particularly probably only the last 2 years, that I've been able to embrace it more, because I see and understand and have been through the challenges that other people go through. And it's kind of my mission now to try and help them do it and get through some bit of a path if they want to. But it was never something that I was like, oh, that's great now, that answers all of these questions or all of these unknowns, because it was still unknown then how I was going to, I still went to school. I think it was the day after, or it might have been the weekend after I got the report. I still had the same teachers. Everything was still the same. I got extra help and extra accommodations for my leaving cert with a laptop and those type of things. But I still had the same books. I still had same volume of information, which is just crazy. I still had all of these books to absorb all this information, to regurgitate in a 3-hour or 3.5-hour exam. So all of that stuff didn't ever change and still doesn't really change. You still have to understand and learn the same volume of stuff, and you still have to go home after being in a full day of school and lock yourself away in a room or do it somewhere and try and learn it all. There's nobody really there to try and help you with that process, other than hopefully if you get additional support or if somebody is at home to help you. So it initially didn't change that much for me, getting a label or not getting a label. It only helps, and I still have that viewpoint, it still only helps to gain accommodations in the system. It still is just a title that is added, really.
Yeah, so it seems that you were given the label but not the tools.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, there was still very little ongoing support that's there, and that's the key. It is ongoing. It's not a once-off thing. You can't just see somebody or go to somebody for one class and then everything just falls into place and all the jigsaw pieces come together. It is an ongoing. You'll have a thing today, you might have Irish, or you might be exempt from Irish, so you might have a language, or you might have home economics next week where you can't understand that. It's a consistent, ongoing, I'd say battle, really, because that's just what it was like for me, but it's not the same way for everybody. But it's just a consistent learning process.
So that learning process then led you to develop your own systems and ways of coping and learning. And
Yeah, I think I put them in place well before I ever knew I had any learning difficulties or any learning differences. Obviously, I had many, many years in a system where I thought I was putting in so much work, and over time and over time and over time, I'd be like, oh, I'm expecting that back now, sure, totally get in the 90s, and was probably nowhere close. So over time, and each one of us with learning differences develops mechanisms and strategies. Now, the most important thing is that they're mechanism strategies that work and help improve aspects of your life. We can all develop mechanism strategies that maybe work short term and then longer term don't have a good effect. So you could be working and working, working, and then you're completely burnt out and exhausted. So it took a while, took a long, long time, really, for me to develop some sort of systems and toolkits that, helps get through a system with some bit of yourself intact, but also then to help you on the next stage forward, whatever that be, either in education or in a career.
Okay. Speaking of coming through it intact, and you mentioned as well that when you were in school that there was still some stigma attached to it. Did you sense any kind of different treatment from other pupils because of that, or your peers at any stage?
I was very fortunate when I understood that I learned differently. I was in a very supportive school environment, that there was other people with different abilities and different learning attributes, that it was never something that was ever picked upon in that particular context. I experienced bits of that at an earlier stage, but that had nothing to do with my learning abilities. And that's, I suppose, the process of school and integration and growing up at the time. But I really enjoyed, when I moved school and was able to kind of grow as a person. We had less class numbers from my previous school, so it was really, really great for me, because that's the core essence, really. When there's 20 odd, nearly even over 30s now in some particular classroom, you just get lost. Really, it's the simple fact of the matter. All the stats and all the research in the world shows that the smaller numbers, the smaller classroom sizes suit people with learning difficulties so much more. Like I had some classes with 6 and 7 of us in leaving cert. Now, not all of them, some might have had in the teens at most, though we would have had maybe 14. So it really helps with that interaction element, to ask questions and to not feel like you're taking time from others. I know a lot of kids go to school now and they don't want to ask questions because there's only that 40-minute slot, and they don't want to take the time then from the teacher if they're teaching something, or if somebody else asks a question and it takes the teacher 5 minutes to explain that. Sure, I can't possibly now ask my question because there isn't enough time. Again, going back to my battle of time, it's all a time thing. So it's a strange one, really.
Okay. Right. It seems so. When you started developing your own kind of strategies and things, in a way, you've kind of made it from there to where you are now. Seems at once inevitable, but also really surprising, and like you've jumped quite a few big hurdles to where you are. So maybe you'll tell me a little bit about how you really got your teeth into developing these strategies more and deciding that you wanted to teach other people and help other people with this.
Yeah, so I think it evolved from many, many years, really. So obviously many, many years I adopted them and used various different tools myself. And these aren't any magic wand things. These are just study skills and study techniques and how you interpret information from a page into your brain and linking in with handwriting and typing. These are all core tools that anybody can learn, regardless of learning difficulties or not. But it's the formula and it's how you learn them and how you sequence them and put them all together. So I was obviously doing that for many, many years by myself, because it was the only way that seemed to be working. And then I left, I finished my master's and I finished education, and I went and joined corporate, and I joined a particular organization that helped people and advocated for people with learning difficulties. And that was kind of a turning point for me personally, because up until that stage, I had never advocated or never really spoken out about any of my own challenges or any of my own difficulties. It was very much hidden, and that was very much the way that I was taught to portray it. And it was never something that I was, I suppose, encouraged to embrace or encouraged to advocate for. Is very much something that was portrayed to me as it needs to be hidden in the box and you need to pretend that it doesn't exist. So until that stage, that's the way it was. And then I started trying to help others in a particular corporate environment to gain help and gain assistance. And from there, really, it just massively took off. I started linking in then people outside the organization, started working with the Dyslexia Association and helping them on events and marketing. And then I started looking in with people here in Cork that run assistive technology companies. There are other people that do tuition. And my network started to grow massively from there. I started linking in with these people more and more and being more fascinated the more I learned about different people and different tools that could be used. I was very much immersed in it, really. And it reaffirmed a concept that I had really from a young age. I always wanted to really change the education system, regardless of my learning capabilities or not, which I didn't know at the time that I was dyslexic. I just knew this isn't a good system for anybody. And I knew that it wasn't really the time for me to do it, obviously, when I was in it. But I knew that hopefully if I was able to get through it and able to prove to myself that I could achieve pretty much the highest level now, have the PhD in hindsight, but that will take another bit of time. But I was determined if I was able to achieve that, then I would have to go back and try and help others get through that particular system that I was able to fight through for myself. So it's gone back a long time, really, since I've kind of had that insight. But it seemed to have just one day, like this switch flicked, and I was able to meet and open doors to so many other people. And they've become now a massive support network for me here in Cork, but also internationally, of people that are in this space to help advocate and help people really in this area.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So from school you went on to university.
Yeah.
Which must have been a big deal in itself, actually, even. So how did you find that transition from school to university in terms of levels of support and in terms of, working more independently?
Yeah. Initially strange. Definitely very strange. UCC was always a pillar in the back of my head, but in the back of my parents' head as like gospel, that it was the place to be. Like it was always in sight, really. no matter, at one stage, it didn't even matter what I was doing as long as I just got there. Which isn't at all advantageous, and I don't advocate for that whatsoever. But it just became that next step. I was fortunate enough really to understand what particular type of courses I wanted to do, and was able to get into a course that I did end up really enjoying. However, it took a while to get to the enjoyment stage. Um, the transition, the actual physical transition from definitely a smaller school and that smaller learning environment to these hundreds of people in just a lecture theatre alone, let alone the thousands of people on campus, was very, very overwhelming. Very, very overwhelming. Like, there's no facility. You can't put up your hand. Well, you can, but I don't know. Have I ever seen anybody put up their hand in a 250 people lecture theatre and ask, can you go back over that there? Because I actually didn't understand it. I've yet to see that after my 5 years there. So it's it's a difficult one when I think back on it, because there was lots of highlights, and there was lots of fabulous times, and I'm really, really thankful for have been there, and definitely made the most of it. As I progressed through, I definitely settled more into it and definitely understood it more and how to get in and around everything. But what really was the saving grace for me was, from even day one, I linked in with the disability department, and they helped not only with the exam accommodations, but I got a dictaphone and I got a laptop, and those things helped kind of day to day with classes. So taking notes and writing stuff down was a massive challenge and a massive struggle to try and keep up with the speed of a lecture. Now, there's new software that has been put in place since then, so I'm sure that that's been adapted a bit more. But at the time, to try and manage so many different modules, and because at the time the course I was in, now it's reduced a lot since then, but I think it had about 12 modules in first year, and they were all summer exams as well, so it wasn't semesterized like it is now. So it's very much 12 exams. I think we might have had one or two that might have had a 10 or 15% project, but it was very much on the day, but just do 10. So I had 6 for leaving. I now just had 10 the year after. Now, it wasn't as much pressure because it's not leaving their points. However, it was an awful lot of pressure. Like, I get a maths and a statistic module, and I just to this day have absolutely no idea, what that even was about. Like, I haven't a clue. I was very, very lucky. I got 2 tutors only for about 2 or 3 hours, that helped with either module, and I was just able to actually do quite well in those exams at the time. But if you asked me to explain it to you, like the concept, not an absolute notion, and still don't. That's still not my forte, and I don't ever make out that it is. But it's definitely, going back to your question of transition. Transition is a massive, massive change element, both within all of us, as we constantly change and constantly evolve, and different jobs or move in different schools. Managing a transition is really, really important. And I think there needs to be more emphasis on the move, both between primary and secondary, and between secondary and college and the work, or particular another course or anything like that. That whole transition period is really, really important.
Okay. Just looking at my questions here.
I've ran out of all questions from all my talking.
No, actually, to be honest, I didn't even look at my questions, because what you were saying was just so interesting. They kept leading to other questions. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Did you find, were there any people in your past or anywhere along your journey who maybe gave you extra support or inspired you in some way? They might not have even been supporting you directly with your education, but even just inspired you by what they were doing?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think I've had a lot, particularly generally in the last actually few years, I've built up a massive support team, both professionally and personally, that have helped get me to where I am now. And particularly in the last year, my network has evolved drastically to help move things forward, which is great. Through school and college, obviously my main places were obviously being in the schooling or in an academic environment, or through bits of sport. So definitely teachers and particularly lecturers in college had a massive impact on my learning and understanding. And there's particular lectures still in UCC that I still think in with quite regularly and speak very fondly of, because it just clicks, and they have a way of articulating knowledge, and they understood and still understand that I have and still had more to offer than maybe what was written as an exam result on a page. So they just got that I just was more capable than a result, that the result really didn't matter, that hopefully I'll go on to do bigger and better things than a result on a page will ever have any weight in determining for me.
Mm-hmm.
So there's been plenty of teachers and mentors and coaches and public figures. Reading books was definitely and still is bits of a struggle, but lots of sports people I very much admired down through the years because of that element of determination and grit, really, and competitiveness. So I have a very competitive gene, and I always want to strive and do my best. So there's lots of people. I very much had a really good support unit with my grandparents. So they've all kind of passed away at different stages, but unfortunately all four of them have gone now. But that was a massive support unit for me, both through school and through college as they gradually got older. There's just such a sense of wisdom and calmness with older people, I find. And I find that with all older people anyway, they don't even have to be related to me. I just think there's such a wisdom and knowledge that is lost sometimes on, unfortunately, people of my generation or people of my age group. And that really does need to be revitalized. But for me, they were a huge pillar of strength, and still kind of are, but unfortunately not here physically anymore.
That's a really nice thing, actually, saying about the generations, that that quite often it's the young people and the much older people, they get it. And the things that seem important in between, they know aren't the important things.
So true. So valuable. Like, you just watch a kid and they can just get so ingrained in playing with a piece of grass like for hours. When an older person, time isn't, yes, time might be inevitable, but the time factor of things and the different pace of life and the presence and the actually being present is just such a different way of living. When you get in between, it just gets all caught up, and you have to do an awful lot of work on yourself to not get sucked into all of the possessions and all of the mayhem, really.
Yeah, all the seemingly important things.
Yeah.
Um,
That's probably for a separate discussion.
yeah.
We can very much get down that philosophical path there now very quickly.
Yeah, I liked how you said that you were inspired by sports people as well, because obviously, you would find support in teachers and things like that, but to be inspired by sports people, I think is really interesting as well. And it seems to me that you've taken a very sort of sportsmanlike or sportswomanlike approach to getting through it all, and to getting your strategies, and to like, like it's a game and you're winning it.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's a team game. It is always a team effort. Yes, I might be the face and the forefront of the business or of what I'm doing. However, I'm fortunate to have such a strong professional network now that I've built up that without them, I definitely wouldn't be where I am now.
Mm.
So it's all, and we're all like that, regardless of whatever field we're in. We all have people, and we all have a particular core, few people, and that element of a tribe to help us move forward and progress. And that's what's needed to help change an education system, both nationally and internationally, in schools and all of that thing, which is hopefully on the horizon to be done. That will take people, and that will take movement, and steps along the path can help do that, hopefully.
Um, so I might just ask you, moving away sort of from your own journey and how you got to be doing what you're doing, maybe you could just explain to me um, what exactly Blossom for Life is and what it does.
Okay, good question.
At
Probably
the end.
really valuable to the discussion. So, Blossom for Life. Well, I suppose particularly first on the name, because the name I get asked about quite a lot, and I know we linked in bits of last year, Nia, when I was speaking to you about the name and those type of things. And the name was a tricky one at the time, and lots of people were like, "Oh, it's not a tree business. Like, why are you calling it that?" And it's broken into parts. So the blossom had an emotional context for me. As I'm sitting here at the moment, I have a massive picture of blossom trees right in front of me, and the blossom trees very much links in with my grandparents. So in the back of to my grandparents' house, they have a massive blossom tree, and I would have spent an awful lot of my childhood both in their back garden, and a particular time of the year, obviously all the blossoms would fall and their whole garden and next door's garden and the other bit of the other garden would just be covered. And I just thought it was the coolest thing in the entire world. And it also has a blossom element. So as you grow, hopefully you blossom and evolve and develop. And that's the core essence of what I do to get you from this stage to blossom and grow to this stage. Um, the four was interesting because originally it was going to be FOR, but the number actually became really important because of the dyscalculia element. So the dyscalculia is the overlap with dyslexia traits, but with maths. So there's a common overlap between understanding maths and understanding words and lots of different other, they all kind of fall under an umbrella section. So the four kind of I wanted to link in with some elements of that, which is why it was for the number instead of FOR. And life was to show that it's actually a consistent process. It's a never ending journey until we're not here. It just shows that no matter what age they are, both from kids, like the youngest is around 7, and the oldest is kind of in his 60s, and a new one actually is in their 70s. It's a consistent life learning process. And it's not something that's pigeon-holed to school, and it's not something that has to be done in an educational context. Um, and that's just in general as well. That's not specifically linked to the business. That's just as life we blossom, hopefully, throughout it. So that's where the name came from. Obviously, the background as to how it evolved and grew was just from my own experience and how passionate I was to help in that space. And I was very lucky, I suppose. It grew very organically and quite quickly. So it has evolved quite a lot since initially starting, and basically it very much is determined by the student or the adult themselves and what core goals they have. So if it's to get through junior cert or get through leaving cert or sit a particular module in college, or if it's literally just improving spelling and reading and maths as an adult, it's very much context and student or adult specific. So initially there is kind of an initial assessment, which is basically a very informal conversation that I have with the student or the child, and if their parents are there or if they're an adult just on their own. And it very much looks at all aspects of their life. So upbringing, home, primary school, secondary school, and core things that they would like us to work on. And from there, then I devise basically an individualistic plan to help suit them to get where we need to go. And then it's an ongoing process, either weekly or bi-weekly or whatever fits in with the family's accommodations and schedules, as to how we try and meet those goals and how we try and progress that student forward.
Mm.
If that answers your question.
It does. Quite comprehensively, thank you. And I find that so interesting, that the age range that you have there.
Yeah, and when I started at first, I thought, oh God, like, is it just gonna, I had no idea really about what we could, what paths it could go down. If you had said to me a year and a bit ago that I'd be here this far along and this much would have changed, I would have thought, no way would it be that far advanced. But it just has emerged, again, people with an open mind and an open concept to things, and wanting either to progress themselves or wanting the best for their child or their child to progress. That never stops. So no matter what age you are, if you want to learn and evolve as a person, regardless of your learning abilities or not, there's ways and strengths and aspects of doing that. And the fortunate thing for the business, but the unfortunate thing for people, is that it's not something that is readily available out there still currently. There are people that operate in kind of a general tuition space, which isn't really what's needed for people with learning difficulties. There needs to be a specific approach. And there's also people that operate in specific learning difficulties and ongoing tuition. However, currently at the moment, I'm pretty much the only person that does it with having the learning difficulty myself. So that's really what creates the bond between me and the student or the adult, is that I just get it. I just understand when they're doing it. We can laugh because I could be like, oh, I did that last week and I made that mistake. And we're on an equal playing field. I'm not a teacher. I'm not better than them. They don't have to be worried about red pens or red marks or spelling mistakes, because I'll make them too. So we're very much at an even playing field, and they're seen and they're heard and they're listened to because I understand it myself.
You're an ally to them basically as well.
Yeah, and in lots of other aspects, they'll tell me stuff, be like, oh, don't tell that now or whatever. So we do, for the people that I see on an ongoing basis, I'm very much ingrained in their progress, and I'm very much involved in how they develop in all aspects of their life. And it's just another, I suppose, person in your corner trying to help you fight your battles. As a child or as a teenager, that's very difficult to do in an education system. And so having another person externally as well to a family unit helps, because you have that bits of impartial advice and impartial viewpoints. It helps, hopefully, and gives that element of support and ongoing support. And that can be, oh, today is really difficult now, or I don't feel well, or anything like that. It's very much a life approach, not just educational specific.
Mm-hmm. And the tutoring, is that all one-to-one? Is it all in person? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's obviously had evolved now through bits of COVID. So prior to that, it was still all one to one and predominantly in person. I would have done some classes still online for people that weren't in a remote aspect for me to get to more nationally. But obviously with bits of COVID, it moved drastically online, and there still continues to be a massive footfall online. So I'm balancing more between the face to face and the online as things evolve and things change from a health pandemic perspective. But lots of classes will remain both online, and where it's feasible and within a health context will then also be face to face. But mainly my aim for going forward is that they will still be where possible on a one-to-one basis. I think that that's really, really important to gain that one-to-one context and connection with a person so they can freely ask questions and they can freely talk to the person or to talk to me about their issues and about what they don't get.
Mm.
It is very valuable though in a group environment because obviously we learn as well from our peers and we learn from others that they get that extra element then in school. So having a combination of both a one-to-one and learning amongst your peers is really valuable. I think possibly going forward, because of the time capacity on myself and on taking people on and growing it, it might move to more of a group dynamic going forward. However, it will still always be small group numbers, and there still will always be a facility for one-to-one if needed.
Mm. Yeah, it seems that feeling of being in a safe space is very important to
Really, really vital. Yeah, that safe space is so important because when kids or when people leave a home, and also with adults, you all need some element of safe space. And when they go into a school or they go into a university that they're just overwhelmed with and they just don't understand and they're bombarded with information that they just don't get, you can get so caught up in that fear zone really, and you lose context of what that safe space means for you. And I suppose we all have that within us really. We all, like, the safe space is only context specific. You really have the safe space within you as a person, but it's how you tap back into that when your confidence has been eroded massively for years and years and years is the element to work on.
um,
I'll ask you some questions, Neil.
I think you've answered all my questions and more now. Is there anything
Great.
that you'd like to add?
Yeah, no, I think it's strange how, looking back on it now, being this kind of far into it and having moments for reflection and moments kind of for insight as to how far it's come and how far it's grown. And yeah, it's definitely a process. It's definitely something that I hope will continue into the future and into the next academic years and years and years to come. There will be a move towards pre-recorded online courses. So with the website being launched within the next while, or hopefully being launched by the time this video might be seen, you never know. And there'll be pre-recorded course packs for study skills, for junior cert subjects, for all of those things to help tap into and help those people that I can't access directly. So there is movement and there's progression to move forward to help change both students' experiences and kids' experiences in school, but help move towards that change in the system. Great. Thank you so much, Nia. You're so good for all you. It wasn't too bad with all the questions.
Good. It was very insightful for me anyway. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody if you're watching or if you're not watching, whatever you're doing.